The guy, the myth, the legend, the one who made us feel afraid, weep, and occasionally even laugh back in the day, is Jack Elam, the star of his day. In today's film, you'll learn a lot about him, as well as why his role in the greatest opening moment in Western TV history led to his losing everything. Who was he? Why did this happen? So what did he lose? You will understand everything at the conclusion of the video. Before we get to reveal his secrets, let us first introduce the guy. Struggles from beginning. Jack Elam was born in the small copper mining town of Miami, Arizona, a place rough around the edges, just like the man he would grow up to be. Known to millions as one of the most unforgettable faces in Hollywood westerns, Elam carved out a place in cinematic history with his unmistakable lazy eye, gravelly voice, and the rare ability to shift from hilarious oddball to terrifying villain with a single look. But before he became a screen legend, Jack Elam was just a kid fighting battles no child should ever have to face. His early life was marked by hardship and loss. He grew up during the unforgiving years of the Great Depression, in a household that struggled to make ends meet. His father was a mill worker who did what he could, but the real pillar of Jack's childhood was his mother, his protector, his encourager, his world. When she passed away, the light in Jack's young life dimmed. He was left in the care of his father, along with his sister, and the years that followed were shadowed by poverty, grief, and instability. It was during this fragile period, when Jack was just 12 years old, that fate dealt him another cruel blow. At a Boy Scout event, just one of those rough and tumble gatherings where boys act out their growing pains, he was accidentally stabbed in the left eye with a pencil during a scuffle. The injury left him permanently blind in that eye. For many, this kind of trauma might have been a sentence, a mark of difference in a world that demands conformity. But for Jack, that pencil to the eye was strangely prophetic. It gave him the very look that would one day make him a legend. Jack never let the injury define him as a victim. He didn't wallow in self-pity, and he certainly didn't let Hollywood's impossible beauty standards keep him from dreaming big. He owned his appearance. That wild, unpredictable gaze became his signature, an eerie, magnetic feature that casting directors couldn't ignore. But despite that, acting didn't come to him immediately. In fact, Jack Elam's path to stardom wasn't paved with scripts and stage lights. It was lined with ledgers and calculators. He attended Santa Monica Junior College and started working as a bookkeeper, eventually securing a job at Bank of America. With a sharp mind for numbers, he transitioned into accounting for film studios, even managing the books at Hollywood Park Racetrack. He rubbed shoulders with producers and studio heads, but instead of being content behind the scenes, something inside him burned hotter with every passing day. Jack knew he didn't belong behind a desk. He wanted to act, not just for the fame or the money, but because somewhere deep inside, he believed he could bring characters to life in a way no one else could. And so he did what few would dare. He stormed into the office of powerhouse producer Samuel Goldwyn and demanded an acting job. Goldwyn could have laughed him out of the room, but there was something about Jack, something raw, arresting, unforgettable. That gamble, that audacity, paid off. His first role came in the 1949 film She Should Have Said No, a low-budget crime drama. It was a minor part, a drop in the vast ocean of Hollywood, but that drop rippled. That one rough-edged performance caught the attention of casting agents. And soon, Jack was a regular face in films that needed a little danger, a little madness, and a lot of character. Throughout the 1950s and beyond, Elam's star steadily rose. He appeared in High Noon, where his presence added palpable tension, and he brought scene-stealing humor to Support Your Local Sheriff. One of his most memorable roles came in Once Upon a Time in the West, where he played a gunman in a scene so iconic that it became a masterclass in cinematic suspense. Jack Elam became the face of chaos and charm. Whether playing drunken gunslingers, crooked deputies, or grizzled old-timers, he had an uncanny ability to walk the line between menace and comedy. He could make you laugh just as easily as he could make your skin crawl. It wasn't just his look. It was the soul he poured into each character. Off screen, Jack was just as unforgettable. He was known for his wit, his honesty, and his deep loyalty to friends and family. Though he often played villains, those who knew him spoke of a kind-hearted man who never forgot where he came from. He had an amazing ability to balance menace with humor, which made him a fan favorite. Elam's talent for making even small roles legendary and iconic made it possible for the world to know that no matter where you put him, he is going to bring you two things: a great performance and a lot of money. Before we get to know just what made him lose his career and how a certain scene affected his life, let's first get to know who were the ladies that he got involved with. If you love forgotten legends and hidden Hollywood truths, hit subscribe and tap the bell. We've got more stories like this coming up, and trust us, you won't want to miss them. Marriages. Do you guys have any idea how many times he has been married over his whole life? He was married twice. The first time to Jean El Hadjer, whom he wed in 1937 and remained with until a tragic event occurred. He was married to Jean El Hadjer. The first time Jack met his future bride was in Los Angeles, California, where they both resided. After they realized that they were meant to be together, they decided to get married on August 24th, 1939, in Las Vegas, Nevada. They were under the impression that their lives would be rather difficult due to the fact that Jake was such a villainous figure, but to everyone's surprise, they lived joyously. On November 23, 1940, they had their first child, a male whom they called Scott Elam. Subsequently, on January 1943, they welcomed a girl whom they named Jerry Elam. Both of these children were born to them together. Then, after spending 24 years together in this wonderful marriage, a terrible event took place. Jean passed away in 1961 when she was 41 years old, and she was laid to rest in Lakewood Memorial Park. We were sorry that we were unable to provide you with further details on their life together. Nevertheless, the most of the information regarding their lives was kept confidential. Margaret M. Jennison was someone Elam met later that year, when he was in the midst of his grief following the death of Jean. They were able to create a deep relationship with one another thanks to the fact that they had similar experiences and provided support to one another. As they became closer to one another, they made the decision to get married later that same year, which helped to strengthen their bond. The marriage between Jack and Margaret lasted for 42 years, until another significant event occurred, which we shall discuss in more detail later. Jacqueline Elam was the name that this couple chose for their daughter, who was born on March 3, 1945. Other than that, this couple was blessed with one daughter together. When it came to her responsibilities as a loving stepmother to Jack's children from his former marriage, Margaret did not shy away from her responsibilities. Do you have any idea what the humorous aspect is? At that period, the majority of individuals were involved in some way with extramarital relationships or had their marriages shattered. It was these individuals who were responsible for portraying the characters of intelligent individuals and heroes of justice on the giant screen. On the other side, we had this sluggish male factor who used to kill, beat, and rape women, but in reality, he was the kindest person you could ever hope to meet. Within the entirety of his professional life, there has not been a single instance of disloyalty or adultery that has been publicized. He was known to treat his female co-stars with such a high level of respect, which proved to be beneficial to him throughout his career. He was able to act in almost every genre, but the authors and viewers always appreciated him more in villainous parts. And let's be honest, we were never disappointed by him. He was able to perform in almost every genre. The manner in which Jack portrayed these rogues, gunslingers, and nefarious henchmen was so impressive that even real-life criminals would look up to him as a model. His portrayal of a thug who was waiting at the train station for the arrival of legendary bandit Frank Miller was one of his most well-known early performances. High Noon, which was released in 1952, was the film in which he gained widespread recognition for his performance. Elam made certain that his ominous presence would make a long-lasting effect on the audience, despite the fact that the role was not more than a paragraph's worth of lines. We observe that after he got somewhat of a footing in history, he started coming on more regularly, but he wasn't alone. The reason why people adored him was because of the renowned Western performers that he had worked with, such as John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, and James Garner. The public began to compare him to these celebrities as a result of the frequency with which he used to appear alongside him. Comedy career and impact. His performances in Western films such as The Man from Laramie in 1955 and Gunfight at the OK Corral in 1957 helped him establish himself as a legendary figure during the 1950s. The audience liked to despise Elam's characters because of his ability to embody the wild and untamed spirit of the frontier itself. This skill earned him a popular favorite. Imagine if you are so talented that your admirers disapprove of you and perhaps find you repulsive. This was the primary goal that he had set for himself, and he did an excellent job of accomplishing it. Consequently, if he was so well known for his appearances as villains, when did he start to become recognized for his comedic performances? When Elam first started to experiment with new aspects of his acting, it was in the late 1960s that it all started. In point of fact, he continued to play villains in westerns, but he was gradually transitioning toward comedy characters in which he could showcase his endearing comedic performances and deadpan delivery. He gained widespread recognition for his comedic abilities, which ultimately resulted in an increase in the number of alternatives available within the Western genre. Support Your Local Sheriff, a Western parody that was released in 1969, featured him in one of the most memorable comedy roles he has ever played. Within the context of this performance, he portrayed Jake, the alcoholic who was a clumsy member of the community. He was adored even more today, and the public wanted him to appear in more comic films. As a result, he continued to shine in comedic parts in films such as Support Your Local Gunfighter in 1971 and The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. At this point in time, Elam had already established himself as a well-known figure on television, where he had previously been in a number of the most popular shows of the period. Several television series, including The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and Bonanza, used him as a guest star on a regular basis. Elam was at the pinnacle of his career, but did the excitement around him remain for all time? Check it out. The degree of buzz that he was experiencing, however, did not stay for very long since he was becoming more and more renowned. He had his longest running television appearance in the 1974 sitcom The Texas Wheelers, in which he portrayed the part of Zach Wheeler, a sluggish and irritable father of four children. This was his longest running television performance up to that point. Despite the fact that the program was only on the air for a brief period of time and was terminated after only 8 episodes, it was so high quality that it achieved cult status. In the Name of God, why that scene? Despite the fact that Jack Elam had already delivered many memorable performances by the late 1960s, often balancing comedy with quiet pathos, it was his role in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968, that immortalized him in the annals of Hollywood history. That single appearance, in a sequence that lasts no longer than 10 minutes, would define him forever. It's difficult to overstate the power of that moment or the impact it had on Elam's career and the cinematic landscape at large. Leone, already known for reinventing the Western with his operatic sense of violence and silence, crafted an opening that wasn't just a scene, it was an experience. And at the center of it, without uttering a single line, was Jack Elam. The setup is deceptively simple. Three gunmen wait at a deserted, wind-blown train station for a mysterious man named Harmonica, played by Charles Bronson. That's all. There is no music, no action, just anticipation. But within those quiet minutes lies a master class in tension, mood, and character building. Every creak of the windmill, every drip of water, every distant sound becomes louder than thunder. It's a kind of silence that demands the audience lean in, hold their breath, and look close. And there, sitting on the edge of that silence, was Elam, scratching, blinking, waiting. Leone's camera adored him. It lingered on his deeply lined face, on the slow twitch of his mouth, on the gleam of his glassy, wandering eye. It wasn't just a close-up. It was a revelation. Every wrinkle, every shadow, every quirk in Elam's expression told a story of a man who had lived 100 lifetimes, all of them hard. Without saying a word, Elam conveyed menace, fatigue, boredom, and wild unpredictability. He didn't have to snarl or shoot. He just had to exist. And somehow that was terrifying. It was as if the West itself had shaped his face and then placed him there to greet the end of something. The brilliance of this scene, and Elam's role in it, lies in how nothing happens, and yet everything happens. Each of the three hired guns reveals something of themselves through the smallest of movements, and yet it's Elam who dominates the screen. His presence, so unexpected, so understated, seems to stretch out time itself. In truth, his performance wasn't just helped by his famously lazy eye and weathered features. They were transformed. What might have been considered flaws by industry standards became the very things that made his character unforgettable. The eye, the rough-hewn look, the crooked grin, they weren't distractions. They were instruments of storytelling. It's no exaggeration to say that this scene should be dissected in every serious film school, not for its action, not for its dialogue, for it has none, but for its mastery of silence, for its absolute understanding that tension doesn't come from noise, but from restraint, and for the way it allowed one actor, so often overlooked, so often relegated to the margins, to step forward and become unforgettable. Elam's role in that opening was a turning point, not just in his career, but in the way audiences saw him. It solidified his status as the ultimate Western villain, a man who could say more with a glance than most could with a monologue, and yet, in doing so, it also tethered him to that image, making it difficult for him to break free and show the full range of what he was capable of. Still, for those few minutes of screen time, Jack Elam became eternal. His face, frozen in Leone's deliberate close-up, became part of the fabric of film history. And though it may have limited his future roles, it also gave him something few actors ever achieved. A single moment so perfect, so indelible, that it outlives the man himself. That scene wasn't just a performance, it was Jack Elam's monument. The truth behind it's a strange kind of irony. How one scene, one moment, one flicker of film can elevate a man and also anchor him in place for the rest of his life. For Jack Elam, that scene came early in Once Upon a Time in the West, a film now immortalized as one of the greatest westerns of all time. In that wordless, tension-choked opening sequence, Elam played a weary, twitch-eyed gunman waiting for a train. He did not speak. He barely moved. He merely existed, scratching his face, swatting at a buzzing fly with slow, deliberate menace. And yet, he stole the screen. It was haunting. It was brilliant. It was cinematic history. And it wrecked him. Why that scene? Why did that one become the chain that tied Jack Elam to a life of typecasting? Because it wasn't just a performance, it became a symbol. The public couldn't separate Elam from the eerie silence, the unblinking stare, and the sense of danger that seemed to radiate from his very presence. After decades of clawing his way up through bit roles and background characters, that scene finally gave him a spotlight, but the light came at a cost. From that moment on, he was the outlaw, the villain, the mad-eyed menace at the end of a dusty road. Hollywood no longer saw Jack Elam, the man. They saw only the ghost of that train station, a ghost that followed him into every audition and every frame that followed. It wasn't fair. Elam had range, true, undeniable range. He had comedic timing sharper than most seasoned comedians. He had a softness to his voice when the role allowed it, and a gentleness in his spirit that was rarely offered a chance to bloom on screen. But after Once Upon a Time in the West, those opportunities dried up like the desert plains he so often roamed in fiction. He tried. God knows he tried. He embraced the villainy at first. After all, it was work, and for a man who had grown up dirt poor in the middle of the Great Depression, work was never taken for granted. He leaned into the growls, the sneers, the unshaven grit. He did it so well that people began to wonder if the man was anything but a villain. But Elam longed to be more than a flickering warning sign. He had spent years before the big break, years working as an accountant, a Navy serviceman, a bookkeeper at Bank of America. He knew the value of hard work and patience. He knew the sting of being overlooked. Yet even after proving himself to directors like Sergio Leone and John Sturges, after being praised by co-stars for his ability to craft unforgettable characters with a single look or gesture, he found himself locked in a prison of perception. By the 1970s, westerns were fading. The golden age was dying out, and with it, the reliable stream of outlaw roles began to shrink. Jack had built his house on sand, and the tide was rising. His roles grew smaller, fewer. His name slipped down the credits, but that damned scene, 10 minutes of brilliance, still followed him. And perhaps the cruelest irony of all was the very feature that had once made him stand out, his eye. The damaged eye that had marked him since childhood. The same eye that made casting directors say, yes, he's perfect, while unknowingly sealing off every door to softer, funnier, or more heartfelt roles. It became his calling card, his curse, a twisted symbol of fate, a wound that opened a door only to have it slam shut behind him. By the end of his career, Elam felt a deep frustration, not with his colleagues. He loved the camaraderie of film sets, respected the directors, and was beloved by cast and crew alike. He was warm, professional, and self-aware, with a quick wit and stories that could hold a room. But inside, he carried the ache of a man who knew he had more to give, who had waited decades to be seen, only to be cast aside when the spotlight finally found him. The saddest truth, those who worked with him knew the truth. They saw the intelligence, the emotional depth, the creativity that existed beyond the squint and the scowl. They knew Jack Elam could have played the wise grandfather, the lovable rogue, the broken hero seeking redemption, but Hollywood never asked him to. His legacy, while rich and iconic, remains incomplete. The world remembers the wild eye, the gravel voice, the villain waiting on the platform. But those who knew Jack Elam, the real Jack Elam, remember something else. They remember a man who carried the burden of being misunderstood with quiet strength, who smiled through disappointment, who gave everything to every role, even the ones that boxed him in, and who, despite it all, never stopped loving the craft. Yes, he played the bad guy, but the man behind the character, he was something else entirely. He was one of the good ones. So did he live a life without controversies and perfection? Let's find out. Controversies. Given that Jack Elam was almost always cast as the wicked character, the outlaw, the crook, the killer with the twitching eye and chilling grin, it might be easy to assume that controversy followed him like a shadow. And to some extent it did, but not in the ways most would expect. The controversy that surrounded Elam wasn't born of scandal or behavior. It was more insidious. It lived in assumptions, stereotypes, and the painful limitations of being typecast in an industry that loved you for one thing and one thing only, the villain you could portray. To look at Jack Elam was for many to see a character rather than a man. His lazy eye, the result of a childhood accident, became both his signature and his stigma. While it helped him stand out and secure roles in the Western genre, it also boxed him in. Hollywood has long been a place where appearance is everything, and for Elam, his appearance often meant he was automatically labeled a bad guy. Time and again, producers saw in him the face of menace, the untrustworthy drifter, the crooked deputy, rarely the hero, never the heartthrob. This narrow vision cost him many doors were closed before they were ever truly opened. And for someone who had a natural charm, intelligence, and a surprising softness beneath the grizzled exterior, it was a quiet heartbreak that he carried for most of his career. Elam knew he was capable of more than the sneering side character, but he also understood the rules of the game. So he leaned in. He gave those roles everything he had, even when they came with baggage. Scripts that asked him to play into stereotypes, or worse, to speak lines that reflected a cruel and outdated view of indigenous people or other marginalized groups. These moments tormented him. Elam was no bigot. In fact, those who knew him behind the scenes described him as a gentleman with a deep sense of fairness and decency. But in the roles he played, he was often called upon to embody cruelty. He did it convincingly, too convincingly for some. Over time, it blurred the line between the actor and the character in the public eye. People assumed the worst. They mistook the roles for the man. And there was more that puzzled people. Before acting, Elam had led a respectable life. He served in the United States Navy during World War II and worked as an accountant, steady, respectable jobs. He was good with numbers and had even managed racetracks. So when he gave it all up to chase the unpredictable and dangerous world of acting, especially portraying Hollywood's most despised archetypes, some questioned his judgment. Why would a war veteran and accountant choose to become the face of villainy in American cinema? It didn't help that some critics accused Elam of reinforcing negative cultural stereotypes through his roles, especially in an era where Westerns too often simplified or misrepresented Native Americans and other groups. Though these decisions were out of his hands as an actor, they hurt him privately. Elam spoke about these concerns and tried to use his influence to encourage better, more thoughtful storytelling. But often his characters were written without nuance. They were meant to be hated. He did the job he was hired to do, even as it weighed on his conscience. Despite it all, Jack Elam remained beloved in the industry. He never tried to hide from his past or change who he was to please others. There was dignity in his presence and loyalty in his friendships. He was well liked, even admired by his peers, actors, directors, crew members alike, because of his honesty, his humor, and the unique spark he brought to every set he stepped on. He was an outsider who had somehow found his place among the stars, and he never forgot how improbable his success truly was. But time, as it does to us all, caught up with him. By the late 1990s, Elam began to face serious health problems. He tried to power through them at first. After all, he was used to pushing past pain and rejection, but his body had other plans. He gradually retreated from the spotlight, not with bitterness, but with grace. He understood that a chapter was closing, and he bowed out quietly, leaving behind a trail of unforgettable roles and a lifetime's worth of lessons learned the hard way. What hurt him most, perhaps, was the misunderstanding. The people who only saw the sneer and not the soul, who confused the character with the man. But those closest to Jack Elam knew the truth. Behind the rough voice, the crooked eye, and the villain's mask was a man who had never stopped trying to be better than the parts he played. And maybe that's what made his story so human. He was a man constantly walking the line between perception and reality, villain and hero, actor and advocate. A man whose journey was filled with contradictions and complexity, and who, in spite of it all, never stopped showing up, never stopped acting, never stopped believing that he was more than what the world expected of him. Death. People were shocked and saddened when they learned that Jack Elam had gone away on October 20th, 2003, at the age of 82. Although they had anticipated his passing, they were nevertheless grieving over his passing. Additionally, this was the item that we had prepared you for when we informed you that Jack's second marriage to Margaret had ended and that the reason for the dissolution of their marriage was due to Jack's tragic death. The amount of money that Jack Elam had in his possession at the time of his passing was believed to be somewhere around $2 million. Congestive heart failure was the cause of death, which was a peaceful conclusion to a life that had been everything but peaceful on the whole. During his latter years, Jack had generally avoided the public eye and remained out of the spotlight. As a result of a career that spanned more than half a century and included more than 200 parts in films and television shows, he had earned the right to take it easy. The last years of his life were spent in calm with his family, away from the insanity that was Hollywood, and tucked away in the peacefulness of the green hills of Oregon. During his time there, the guy who had previously gained fame for portraying bandits, shooters, and grizzled outlaws enjoyed a peaceful existence, surrounded by the people he loved. His demise did not make headlines in the same way that a blockbuster premiere could, but it did send ripples through the hearts of generations of film enthusiasts and other performers who were aware of what he had done to the American film industry. Many people recalled his amazing eyes, his gravelly voice, and his unparalleled presence on film because of the flood of tributes that flowed in. The people who knew him well, however, recalled his friendliness, his sense of humor, and the fact that he never failed to make time to encourage younger performers who were attempting to find their path. On the other hand, Jack Elam's legacy did not end there, despite the fact that he passed away far away from the sets and sound stages where he built his reputation. When someone watches a classic Western and sees the wild-eyed bandit swagger into frame, they are witnessing more than simply a character. This is because the outlaw is part threat and half mischief. They are going to visit Jack, the little kid who was unable to spend enough time with his mother, the man who made his way into Hollywood with nothing more than a crooked gaze and a dream, and the actor who transformed a childhood injury into a ticket to immortality. It wasn't simply in stories that Jack Elam appeared in. He was a true one. Not only that, but that narrative continues to live on in the hearts of fans. Should Hollywood have treated Jack Elam with more respect? Or was his legend born the moment that train pulled into the station? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you learned something new today, smash that like button. Subscribe for more legendary tales and untold Hollywood stories, and share this video to keep Jack Elam's legacy alive.